Well, yeah, I mean, libertarian is basically turned into this term that's about, free sex and drugs and legalizing drugs and shitting on the cops and everything. And I get it, man. I used to have this idea that, hey, if it's not harming you, it's none of your business. But I mean, degeneracy does grow the state. I'm sorry to tell people that degeneracy grows the state. If you have people who have to go into use drugs to the point that they have to go into like a program. Most of those programs that they're going to go into, not everybody can afford to go into the Betty Ford clinic and things like that, where they're going into state. I mean, it grows the state. It's also like we borders. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like I used to be I have episodes and I left them up. I have episodes where I argue for open borders. They're back in my catalog. And there are a lot of arguments about why you should have closed borders. And Hans Hermann Hoppe, God love him, I love the guy. He has these elaborate arguments about how public property is actually the property of net taxpayers and things like that. I'm just like, look, you're talking about Ancapistan. You're talking about building this libertarian society, and you're going to import people who don't know anything about that, don't want to know about that, and are immediately going to start using public resources, which grows the state. Are you retarded?
What is up, everybody? My name is Kyle Matovcik. I am the host of the In Liberty and Health podcast, where we talk all things liberty, health, and wellness, and beyond. My hope is to encourage and spread the message of liberty and physical and mental well-being. I hope you enjoy all the topics we talk about with our guests. We're on all major streaming platforms, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Man, I'm doing as good as anyone can do getting buried by his 13-year-old son on leg day.
I'm not going to apologize for not being on this podcast because I got to go see Metallica. So if that's a problem, kiss my ass. Okay?
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
All right, everybody, this is In Liberty and Health, episode number 176, and this is somebody that I've really enjoyed listening to, talking to, and honestly learning from, because he's really shaped the way I look at politics in the world over the last couple of years. I have the great Pete Quinones with me. How you doing today, dude?
I'm doing good, Kyle. A lot of people will tell you that that's really bad, that I shape anyone's thinking.
Yeah,
because I mean, I'm a grifter.
Mm-hmm.
I say things just to cause controversy, so people will. Yeah. It's just all of this cope when people aren't looking at the orthodoxy anymore and actually believing in it and searching in other places.
Yeah, or you're black pilled, which I don't see that in you as all. I posted about that today on Twitter and Facebook. I just can't stand the fucking black pill mentality that I see out of some people. Like I want to slap the shit out of these people, because it's like, you got one opportunity in front of you to do something, go fucking find something to do. Like I can never get with the doomer mentality, and I think you're the same way, although people will bust your chops about it.
Well, what's funny, it's funny you should mention that. My Friday Substack tomorrow will be about that. It will be about the black pill, and and why I am not black pilled at all. A lot of people say when they call people black pilled, those people have in their mind formulated they have a way, it's a formula that they're going to get to the liberty that they want. And if you don't buy into the formula, or if you dare to criticize it, then you're black pilled, because you're not down with their program. And I would never, if somebody disagreed with me, and like if somebody's like, well, what we need to do is, we need to get, just get one president elected and everything. I'm not going to say that you're black pilled. I'm going to say that you're retarded. It's like, I mean, it's just the way it is. It's the people don't understand. I have in 40 minutes, I have a podcast coming out where Tom Woods and I break down Pat Buchanan's 1992 Republican National Convention speech, which is called the Culture War speech.
Yeah.
And he says, if we don't win the culture, we're going to lose. And 31 years later, you can look and see the culture is gone. So, you know, I'm not saying Pat Buchanan is a prophet and everything he says is true, but culture is really important. You go to small towns, you know, I know you're in PA, and, you know, my mother's family's all from Western PA. I've been there since, I just found out recently, since the early 1800s.
Oh, wow.
And the small town mentality is not what you see on TV, what they're pushing on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And but are the people in power, do they share the same culture as those small town people who just want to be left alone and just want to live their lives? No.
Yeah. I had Tommy on the other week, and I read the status to him, but I'll kind of paraphrase it. It's funny. My dad's actually texting me right now, but, you know, my family's owned shops here in like Creighton, southwestern Pennsylvania for years and years and years. And, it like almost brought me to tears, because I've heard this same story play out so many times. It's really, really interesting to me. But, a customer that had been with my grandfather, my dad, and then I probably at some point worked on their car, had went into my dad's office and said, "Hey, I've seen you grow up, and I saw your dad grow up, but hey, you know, I took care of my kids. I'm moving to Florida now." And, you know, there's just been so many stories like that. Yeah. And, you know, I was thinking about moving to Florida, and I realized that like the network I have here, where I call my plumber and he's here within 2 days in my house. He knows where everything is. I call my dad and he knows somebody. That you cannot put a price on that. And I think that's kind of something that you've really hit on over the last couple of years. And I think that a lot of liberty-minded people think that it's all about, you know, politics in maybe one regard, but they don't want to acknowledge that, you know, a network is much more powerful than any kind of political office that you'll ever hold.
Sure. You know, and it wears on me that I've spoken so much about people moving out of cities, because as beneficial as it is, a lot of people in cities, that's where their family is. That's where their whole network is. But I honestly believe that if you are going to first of all, cities are dangerous. I've lived in New York City. I've lived in Atlanta, right outside of Atlanta, but close enough. And they're just dangerous at this point in time. And, you know, if you're a father, if you're a husband, and you have kids and you have to take care of them, you know, I tell people, get out of cities. And, you know, people are like, well, you also talk about culture, and this is where my culture is. Yeah, I mean, I get that, man. I struggle with that, but I just don't see anything good about being in a city other than being able to like really make a lot of, you know, create a lot of wealth for yourself, because a lot of people in cities make a lot of money, but it's also really expensive too. I mean, moving to where I live in Alabama, and even where we're looking to move to, I mean, the cost of living just is half of most cities. So so it's like, why would I mean, I'd honestly rather make less money and live in a town that never put masks on and you know, doesn't put up with the woke stuff than you know, make a ton of money. You know, I didn't make a ton of money living in Atlanta, but I made really good money working for the company I did. And benefits, I mean, that's what everybody talks about. Benefits, the whole boomer generation of benefits. That was hard to give up, but I feel so much safer. And it's like, I mean, I know if I leave my front door open at night, the odds that someone's going to walk through it are just really small. And I mean, I don't live in a small town right now. I live in a college town, but still, I feel so much safer than Atlanta, where, I mean, I literally, I used to walk around my house with a gun, not because I thought somebody was going to break in, but in case somebody broke in. And there was the chance that could happen, especially after 2020.
Right. Yeah. Holy fuck. Yeah. I can't really imagine that. And like you said, it's tough for people because, you don't want to leave behind what you know. And a lot of people, that's all they know is growing up in a fucking city. But like, you got to kind of weigh your options here. And it was interesting that you brought up fathers and stuff like that, because I think that's something that also a lot of libertarians kind of want to ignore. I got into a little tizzy. I don't know if you caught it with Asarchist on Twitter because of
I blocked him a long time ago, and
yeah.
even when I got the new account, he had blocked me before I even got a chance to block him. So I mean, I met him at Childerberg in May, and you meet people face to face, and it's a different story. But when somebody is promoting the kind of when somebody's worldview leads to unspeakable horrors, it's, I mean, what can I do? What can you do?
Yeah. And he's a perfect example of somebody I think that's just perpetually online. And like when he started saving screenshots of shit that I said and posting it and then asking other people for screenshots after I blocked him, I'm like, I don't think sane, normal people do this shit. Like, I think there's something wrong with people who need screenshots of people they don't like. Like, none of these people I argue with on Twitter or anything like that, you guys take up no space in my head. There's so much stuff that I have going on outside of that. Like, the brief interactions that may be bad on Twitter, they're like here and gone. But I think for some people, that's their entire life. And I can't imagine that being my life.
Well, I mean, the only time I really save screenshots is if they're profound, really funny, or like the other day.
I know why you would, but yeah.
And on Facebook the other day, I mean, I saved like 10 screenshots into a folder because the guy was just basically threatening me. He was threatening to come and find me and everything like that. And I mean, it was over. And what's funny is I posted all of those screenshots, and I was telling people, what did I do? What did I do? I know how I get sometimes. I know that I can upset people, and I know that sometimes I push it a little too far. But in this case, I just didn't. And the guy just came off like a psychopath, because he's just one of these people who thinks he's a lot smarter than he actually is. So he responded to me in a word salad, and I was just very pointed with him coming back. And I lost his shit. I mean, it was wild, but that's it. But I've been threatened so many times, and no one's gonna come and do anything. No one has the resources to come and try and find you. And even if they did have your address, they probably live halfway. I mean, anyone who comes halfway across the country because, of something you said on social media, I mean, this person needs to be put down like a dog when they get here. So,
yeah. And to think that anybody would really take the time to do that. Like, I got a wife, I have a band, I have, tons of people I care about greatly. Why would I want to go somewhere with the intention of harm? Like, I don't care about anybody that I don't like enough to go out of my way to do shit like that. So, and
I should have said a rabid dog, because I consider most dogs to be more valuable to the world than a lot of the people I encounter on social media.
Yeah, so. No, I completely agree. And one thing that you've always kind of maintained that I liked was that you would say this shit to people's face, and I'm the same way. I'm not.
I've done it. I've had people. I've had people confront me, at things, and I'm like, okay, what? I mean, what? It's like, I mean, if you want to swing, go ahead and swing. But it's like, I mean, most of these people who get really upset and start talking shit. First of all, they're doing it behind an anonymous account. Yeah. And even if they're not, if you did see them in IRL, most of them will avoid you, will avert their eyes from you.
Yeah.
And I've had that. Yeah, I've had that happen. And there's one person that I've feuded with a lot over the last year and a half. And to his credit, when we've seen each other in real life a couple of times, he didn't do that. He didn't run away. didn't, so I mean, there's a level of respect there. I mean, not talking, and we're not friendly at all. But at least they didn't divert their eyes and run away.
Yeah. I mean, you could definitely give someone respect for that, because at least they have the balls to actually, look you eye to eye rather than just kind of do one of those. I've seen so much of that shit, and that's just fucking pussy shit. And look, I've never been in a fight my entire life, but it's because I don't provoke people into that. Either that, and I don't want to get fucking hit. Like,
Getting hit sucks, man. I mean, the worst thing about fights is that even if you are winning, I mean, I've broken that bone on somebody before. You know how much that hurts for the next month and a half? I mean, that night it was like I punched somebody. I felt it. I felt the crack, put my hand down for a couple seconds, lifted it up, and it had already swelled up like an inch, and who wants to get in fights? The thing about street fights is you get tired so quick. I don't care what kind of good shape you're in or anything like that. You just you're exhausted right away. So if you don't get a couple shots in the beginning, I mean, it's just basically you're dancing then after 10 seconds.
Yeah, dude, fuck that. It ain't worth it. So I guess I want to ask this question because this is something that I was actually fascinated in, and I've tweeted out that I think Stefan Molyneux was right about a majority of shit, and the one thing that he touched on that a lot of people got really upset by is race and IQ stuff. And I've heard the left-leaning people tend to say, "Oh, that's all been debunked," but they never put forth any counter evidence to this stuff. And the other thing that a lot of the people who talk about race and IQ stuff is they never say, your genetics or destiny, right? You're if you're born black or something like that, then you're doomed to a life of crime. Nobody ever says that. They just say, hey, there are patterns amongst certain races, certain groups, and you can make, you can kind of get a glimpse at stuff. But once again, this isn't people's destinies. This is just something that you observe patterns in. So I guess the first question is, have you noticed an increase in hostility since you started kind of touching that sacred topic?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, I had somebody comment, and it was from, I don't know what podcast it was, but they said that basically I was calling for a white ethno state in the last episode. And I don't think I've ever called for that. I have no problem with it. I mean, leftists used to love, leftists love Sweden.
Yeah. What do you call Israel, though?
Yeah, well, a socialist ethno state. Yeah. But I was looking for this thing I had found, and it really, so there was this woman in St. Louis who was robbed, beaten, and stabbed by a 15-year-old Somali refugee, and they ended up not charging him because his IQ was 49.
Holy shit.
And and to think there are people now, I know Somalis are on average, I think they have the lowest IQ in the world. Okay. It might be, I might be wrong on that, but it's definitely in the ballpark, in the low 3. Does that mean every single one of them is, if their average IQ is 80, does that mean every single one of them is a violent criminal?
No.
I don't want them. I don't want somebody whose IQ is 80 as my neighbor, though.
Right.
Because what is IQ about? It's about potentiality.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a little break from the show real quick to tell you about the show's sponsors. I am now working with the great Stephen Fox to bring you Fox & Sons coffee. As you can see, I got 2 bags right here, or for those listening, I was holding 2 bags. It is organically roasted up in Michigan. If you're a caffeine addict, much like myself, then head over to foxandsonscoffee.com to get yourself some of their fantastic coffee. They got a light roast, which I'm holding in my hand. They have the Electric Boogaloo blend, which is fantastic as well. I just had it this morning, and if you're like me, you like dark roast coffee, which kicks you right in the freaking face first thing in the morning, they have that for you as well. So head over to foxandsonscoffee.com, use code Kyle, Kyle, to get yourself a little discount. Let them know that I sent you, and get yourself caffeinated, get jacked and tan, and do what you got to do. All right, guys, back to the podcast. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Well, what is their potential? Also, if they're first generation, what did they go through in their life? I mean, how much PTSD do they have? How much over bombings? And I know it was the United States who did it. It doesn't mean anything. It's like, I want myself and my wife to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned that when I was going, I think I mentioned this on Twitter and on Facebook, that we're looking for another town to move into. And as soon as we find a house, I find out, she tells me what the town is, and I go and I look at the demographics.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, if the demographics are like Atlanta demographics, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. I mean, let's say predominantly white towns are less violent than than towns that are like Tuskegee here in Alabama. It's 98% Black.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the highest crime rates in the country. Is it because they're Black? Well, I mean, statistics mete out that anyone who's been on the internet for a long time knows the whole 13% of the population does over 50% of the violent crime, 50% of the murder. What's also interesting to me is, I don't call myself a libertarian anymore at all. And libertarians will be the first people to call you out for racism or anything like that. Have you ever been to a libertarian event?
Yep. I know exactly where you're going.
How many black people and Hispanics did you see there?
I could probably count on less than my two hands.
I mean, and it's not like, I mean, and when they do get one, like Maj Touré or something like, I mean, that's the promotion. It's like
they're a total token.
We got our token.
Yeah,
we got our token. I mean, it is. I'm sorry, that's a whole lot more racist to me than me going, I was looking at this town in Alabama, which I was earlier today, and it's 99.41% Black. I mean, white. It's 99.41% white. And I'm like, if we can get that house, we'll take it. Of course, you want to visit there. You want to see how poor it is, because poor whites can be just as violent as poor Blacks. But there was a comment on Twitter yesterday that I thought was under my post about looking for houses and having them be, and really reading this comment, I think I actually said it's one of the best comments I ever saw on Twitter. And if you understand municipal bonds, you'll get this, and it's pretty clear. I'm scrolling. I apologize. This is great podcasting, people. This is great podcasting, people. But what this gentleman said was, I'm almost there.
That's okay.
It was okay. He says, I used to build municipal bond portfolios. Now, what muni bonds are is basically towns and principality. They sell bonds so that they can pay their bills. And these bonds don't pay a set rate. I mean, I think some of them pay a set rate, but most of the ones you're going to build a portfolio with will have a variable rate. So you have a better, you're not just making 3%, you have a chance of making 10, 12%. Sure. He says, I used to build municipal bond portfolios, and when researching health creditworthiness of a municipality, it was amazing how you could basically skip all the analysis by looking up the demographics. Anything over 15% Black was marginal. If it got to plus 20%, it was basically unusable. So, do I hate Black people? Absolutely not. It's like we all have our Black friends. We all have our friends from other races that, even if that race is has a propensity for, like the inclusiveness of the Asian community, how they don't like to let anybody in. We all have those friends and everything. Yeah. Do I want to live in a place that, especially in a lower income, a place where you have a low cost of living? A lot of people move there so they can make their money go further. A lot of people live there because they can't afford to live anywhere else. And people, and one of the libertarian things to say is, well, violence is people being poor is why people are violent. And I'm one of those people who says, let's reverse that a little bit. Let's see. Do you think people could be poor because they're violent?
Yeah. I mean, it's an honest question. And once again, there is a propensity, and it's not just in any specific race, it's a certain IQ that tends to lead towards more violence. And then it's also an age range too, from what I recall. And I've looked at this shit in years, but yeah, it's like around the ages of like 18 to 27. And then after 27, people pretty much grow out of being violent. And it's, once again, it's not just black, it's not just white, it's not just Asian, it's, men in the ages of 18 to 27, which kind of makes sense when you think about how high your testosterone is and how you're trying to define yourself in the world. And then,
but if you have one group that is overrepresented in violent crime, that's the one you're going to want to avoid, even if they're all good people. It's like the one. This was, I think it was from 2006, and I actually have the actual study on my phone. It said that homicides per 1,000. White men who made under $10,000 a year had a lower homicide rate per 1,000 than black men who made over $85,000 a year. And it wasn't even close. You could take all of the white men combined who made less than $40,000 a year, take their homicide numbers combined, and it was still less than black men who make over $85,000 a year. There's a problem, and I want to avoid problems.
Yeah. And once again, people are going to interpret that as saying, oh, you're racist, you hate all black people. But it's like, no, but, is it wrong to have preferences? Because this is kind of what I got a lot of flack
and that's
for
what libertarians are all about, right? They're libertarians about, you shouldn't be forced to, you shouldn't be forced to, be with commies or anything like that. And everything. It's like, okay, well then expand that out. Where do you stop that? Are you going to force integration upon people? No, it's just, they're going to say that you're immoral. That's it. There's an immorality. I mean, but they don't say that about the Japanese, who don't want anybody but Japanese in their country. But of course, Brian Kaplan, says on Twitter that, oh, I went to Japan and it's way too, the culture is way too monolithic. They need low-waged workers from Africa and India to come in there.
Well, what's like, interesting?
Hey, dude, how about fuck you, and we take care of our own country?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting to me to look at kind of the IQ stuff, especially when you start getting over towards Asian populations, because they have a very tight family structure, they have a higher IQ, and they have good diets. So all these things combined, it leads you to question, okay, well, what's the chicken or the egg here? Because I don't think we really know if it's entirely environmental. Some people say it could be like 50-50. It's like 80-20 from what I heard. Like I said, I haven't touched this shit in years, but we should ask these questions. We should be able to have this conversation. I call a lot of flack because I said I don't want to date single moms, and I don't want to date black women. They're just not attractive to me. At least most aren't. Does that make me racist? If it does, then I guess I'm racist, but my wife is white. I want, obviously I wanted her because we're married now. I want our kids to look like us and resemble us. Just is what it is. That's my preference. There's some white guys who may have a preference for black women. I work with a dude who, I don't care. I don't have a problem with that. But though, once again, if you say you have this preference against single moms, against, people of a different race, then now you're racist and you're a piece of shit. I mean, I got all sorts of shit thrown at me for pretty much just saying I want to date a white woman who looks kind of like me.
You can make those statements without judging the people who do.
Right.
So, and if I remember correctly, because I think I was watching that, I think you did have a little judgmental. You may have said something like, I don't understand men who would want to, date single moms or something like that. And then, it's like I have personal friends who are married to same, who ended up marrying single moms, and of course they're gonna get mad.
Yeah, and I do not have any personal issues with people doing this, but I think where people lose the plot and where they don't understand is that they'll be against feminism all day, but they don't understand the root of why we have so many shows where the kids have 2 Christmases and the kids have 2 dads. And now, you're not the stepdad, you're the dad who stepped up. And, we have this whole culture surrounding deadbeat dads. And we never talk about the mothers in the situation. We always focus on the dads, right? Is largely because of feminism and because we've been told from birth that, if you sacrifice yourself on the altar for women, then you're a good guy, right? So, and once again, guys who want to do whatever, if you want to date a single mom, I don't have a problem with that, but just recognize when, what the latent purpose of this is, because you're fulfilling women's sexual strategies, which once again, that's fine if you want to do that, but just don't tell me I'm an asshole for having a preference against that. And could I have been more graceful? Absolutely. But I still stand by the points. And if it offends people, then it is what it is.
No, I understand. I mean, I prefer, what's funny is I've always said, like, in my head that I've always, I've been attracted to ethnic women, but I've always ended up dating white women. I've always ended up dating white women.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been with Asian women and women of pretty much everything but a black woman, just because I was never attracted to them or never found one that things worked out with. But obviously, I ultimately ended up with my wife, who's just I don't even know what nationality is. Her last name was Hedinger, but I don't know what nationality that is.
Sounds German.
Okay, yeah, it's possible. Her dad's like fucking 6'7" tall, so I don't know if that's like German or maybe like
you got to be,
something
and
like
also
that.
you got to be careful with that.
Mm-hmm.
You want someone 6'7" pissed at you.
No, he's like
someone from Western PA.
Oh no, he hunts and everything too. I mean, the dude can shoot a bow and kill a deer from fucking yards and yards away. He makes really good jerky too. So I mean, that's a pretty big benefit. But yeah,
like plus.
Oh, yeah, dude, he's like the nicest dude in the world. And my in-laws ain't too bad. But the other thing that people get upset about is when you talk about divorced children as well, because I mean, this is a preference, and we've now just grown up where everybody's parents were divorced. My parents were divorced, my wife's parents were divorced. This is so normalized, and it is higher in certain communities. And then once again, this begs another question: is this contributing to the problems that we're seeing today? And I think it's pretty hard to argue that it isn't contributing, because I mean, like, I think it's like a majority of the mass shooters over the last 20 years were from single parents. I mean, come on.
You just made me realize something.
Good.
I have never in my adult life had a relationship with a woman whose parents weren't divorced.
Wow. Yeah.
I just scanned my brain real quick. And wow.
But think about how absurd that is. How absurd it would have been back 100 years ago to tell somebody that everybody you dated was the product of divorced parents. And once again, this isn't, I'm not condemning all these people. We recognize that there was a problem, and either the people failed to work through the problem, or they decided the problem, they couldn't figure it out. And I think a lot of this does come down to no fault divorce. And once again, this is another subject that I just don't think a lot of libertarians talk about, is no fault divorce and how this influences women and how it actually grows the government. And this was an argument that I was trying to make, is that we shouldn't be so supportive and say that single mothers are the greatest thing in the world, because what grows the state disproportionately? The welfare state. And if you're going to sit here and facilitate women's free range of free choices, and not saying that they necessarily shouldn't have those, then at a certain point there are consequences to that. And now when you have multi-trillion-dollar welfare state every single year, you should begin to ask questions, and if what you're doing is enabling this or helping push us forward towards something that's a little bit more traditional. I'm not saying that everybody has to be traditional, but once again, what's your goal? And my goal is to have a traditional family. So once again, this is why I've been with my wife for years and years and years. And there were things that I noticed about her and things that I knew about her past that would enable me to consider her as a long-term partner.
Sure. I think what you're one of the points you're raising here, and something I can bring up, is the non-aggression principle. And I think once people take the non-aggression principle and push it past like private property, they basically open it up so that anything you do in the culture that doesn't directly affect somebody else and hurt somebody else is permissible. I mean, I've had libertarians tell me that if there were prostitutes on the corner of every street in their town, that wouldn't change. That's not their problem. I'm like, well, I can tell you a place where that happened a lot in the 1920s, and I can tell you what had to be done in order to fix the problem. And everything has to come down to economics too, and that's a big problem with me for with libertarianism, is they pretty much believe that if they started their own society and the economics was just good, that would solve a lot of that would solve most of, they would say that solve most of the problems that we're experiencing today.
No.
It's basically people who are autistic, who don't understand family, they don't understand culture, they don't understand. I mean, I think it's also atheists too, because any Christian or Muslim who says that is out of their mind. They don't believe in their faith. Because I've said this too, going back to the prostitution thing. So I don't even think that in order for the culture of a community to be affected, I don't even think those prostitutes need to be out on the streets. I think just having that, that many people to have to resort to prostitution you would see an effect on the culture. It would affect the family, and that would spread out. That would move out. That would radiate. And people will say, "Well, you don't have to have prostitution. You're not, as long as the economics is good, you don't have to have prostitution." Okay, so what about child abuse? Right. And this is a point I've tried to make, and people automatically think they have an answer to it. Is, I think Michael Malice has said this too. I think Michael Malice has said, he's probably one of the biggest promoters of anarchism in the world,
and Zionism.
Is that you? The biggest problem for anarchism is children. What do you do about children? I mean, if you have somebody who, if private property is everything now, if everything is private property, even the streets are private property, and you have somebody who is sexually abusing their daughter on their property, what do you do? What do you do if it's okay with the mother? The mother is fine with it. What do you do? What if he has 40 acres and a mule, and 25 of his relatives have built houses and built, tiny homes on there? So now he has all of his relatives there, and they all back him up. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to send your private police force into there? I'm sorry, the private police force can't go into there. Now you're violating somebody's, property. Right. And, unless you've seen this happen, I mean, maybe you can make the argument, but it is somebody's property. And basically what you have to do at that point is, especially if the guy has relatives or friends who will pick up rifles to protect him, you're going to have to put together your own group to pick up rifles and go in there and stop him. Now, how many people are going to do that for free? Not a lot. So you're going to have to, basically, you've just reinstituted the government.
Yeah.
And that is, so, my big thing over the past year is, and this is why I think that people want to write papers about me and criticize me, but I don't think anybody wants to debate me, because, and maybe they do, I think it'd be a really, really bad idea, because as far as I'm concerned, as soon as you start talking about your theory of how things work, if you're staring down the muzzle of a gun that I'm pointing at you, your theory goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And
what's the Mike Tyson saying? Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but we live in a world where the biggest and the toughest, they're in charge. Mm-hmm. The ones with the biggest army. And you can say that's immoral. Okay, then the whole of history has been immoral. Yeah. And that's fine if you want to make that claim too. But you also have an overwhelming majority of the people on this planet, whether they've been brainwashed into it or not, who want a government. And my goal is, and this could be as Pollyanna as, thinking that you're going to have Ancapistan one day, is you have the best government you possibly can. Mm-hmm. And which is why I'm not, people want to straw man me and say, oh, he wants to take over he thinks you can have a good government in Washington, D.C. Never said that. Never. I said, really, honestly, the only way to take care of Washington, D.C. at this point is if a Red Caesar comes up and just basically goes in there and has the army, has the military on his side, and he just starts cleaning house and starts shutting down. State Department gone, Pentagon mm-hmm. gone, all this stuff. And he basically he's doing this with the army protecting him. Mm-hmm. The military protecting him.
Yeah. But once again, how likely is that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And mm-hmm. so, but what's more likely is you move to a small area, small polity that's already red. Yeah. I mean, I know that they're warmongers. I know that they have blood on their hands. And they probably voted for Mitt Romney. Oh, the horror. Like, you were always an anarchist or libertarian. Shut the fuck up. But you go in there and you put together a plan to, exert as much political influence. Maybe I don't know that I could get elected mayor ever, but maybe get someone elected mayor that's on your side. Get a couple people on the school board. The sheriff's more important than anything.
No, but all cops are bastards. That's what I keep hearing.
Well, yeah, whatever. I mean, I used to say the same thing. I mean, come on. We're literally at the point, and this is literally, I'm using literally, and I'm not using it as, flippantly. I'm saying literally that if you want liberty, you have to get people in power who are your friends. Mm-hmm. That's basically where we're at. Look at the left. People on the left can get away with, and let's not even say the left. Let's say the regime, because there's people, most of the Republicans are part of the regime anyway.
Right.
Jeffrey Epstein can get away with doing the things that he did because his friends, now they may be his people who he was blackmailing, but his friends were in power. Mm-hmm. Those complete animals that burnt cities, that set cities on fire and killed people in the streets in 2020, the reason they didn't go to jail is because their friends were in power. Yeah. The reason why they could be bailed out the same day is their friends were in power.
And their friends also had the money and went around and unleashed bail. Yeah, I listened to your episode with Tom today, actually, because I know you sent out the email for it, but it really kind of had me there for a moment, because I forget what part you guys were in the speech, but I realized how the Overton window shifts. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is just something that came on to me real quick. How much Overton window has shifted, because even I say, like, okay, these people had a right to be mad about George Floyd. And then always after that is, well, but they don't have a right to destroy private property. But that tells you how far the Overton window has shifted, because your initial statement should always be, why the fuck are you destroying private property that has nothing to do with anything that happened to, George Floyd? Like, I get it, people are upset, but like, you have no right to fucking do that. Once again, how much Overton window shifted is that even conservatives, everybody said, yeah, they should be mad, but this isn't the way to do it. It should be no. Your ass goes to jail, and if you destroy people's property, you will be dealt with to the fucking harshest extent of the law. That makes me unlibertarian. Once again, in a private law society, the same shit would happen. If you go destroying somebody's business, you're gonna be fucking dealt with. So
no, I mean, it's the whole morality of the thing is what really upsets me. Mm-hmm. And I used to make that argument all the time too, is, well, we can't resort to this because it's immoral. I mean, if reality is immoral, just eat a gun, eat a bullet. I mean, because reality is what it is. Mm-hmm. And if you want to exist outside of reality, where you're just basically like everything that's done by anyone who has any power is immoral. I think I don't think Tom will be upset about me saying this, but he had on, I can't remember her name. She was sweet. I met her in Orlando, but it was a lady who got involved locally in Maryland politics and was able to like get mask mandates lifted and everything through 2020. She figured out how to do it. She researched it. What is going to be what's going to work? What can we actually use? What leverage can we get to make sure we don't have to do this? And I met her in Orlando. Sweet, wonderful. Then Tom had her on like a couple days later, and he showed me a comment where somebody was like, oh, well, she just used, she's just as immoral as everyone else because she used the system.
I don't believe in the death penalty, but
yeah. I mean, how do you what do you do with someone like that?
Yeah.
What do you do with someone like that? It's like, I remember when I was cheering DeSantis, like passing the laws saying that you couldn't, that private businesses couldn't have mask mandates or mandate, the shot and everything. And people were like, well, that's not libertarian. I'm like, I don't care. I mean, it's your libertarianism is theory. It doesn't exist in the real world, and it can't. And this is why I can't call myself, like, people ask me, what are you? I'm saying I'm right wing, because it's not it's not an ideology. Mm-hmm. It's basically a way to live, because real libertarianism, real communism, real liberalism, real republicanism, real democracy, they've never been tried. They can't. The ideologies cannot exist in the real world because they're designed outside of the real world. They're designed in a freaking classroom. They're designed in someone's study where they say, well, this would be the perfect, the greatest political philosophy of all time. And as soon as you bring that in to the real world, it just, boom, holes just shot right in it. Boom. You can't have it. Huh? You can't. I mean, the founders figured that out right away. They're like, man, the only way this will survive is if we have to have a very, very moral society. I don't even think that could work. It's like, it's just, the Constitution was basically just, to me, was them just saying, well, this is the way the world is right now, so let's put it down on paper. Let's codify it on paper. And then, of course, things are going to change. I mean, it's like, to think that you have an ideology that you're going to bring in and it's going to replace what exists now. The problem with that is there is no ideology right now. It's about power. It's about power. I wrote an article that I sent to a bunch of people. I had a bunch of people read it. They love the article, but like no website has wanted to publish this article. And it's about how there is no ideology. And I think I titled it Preferences and Power. And basically the way you're going to even get a lick of what you want in this world, you're going to have to take power. And then you're just going to have to figure out, what preferences do you want? Do you want to get rid of property tax? Do you want to make it so that people could own their property? like own it. I mean, like you could create your own statecraft on it. Okay, that's your thing. That's what you're going to go for. You're going to privatize the schools. That's your only. You can't do all of these things. I mean, it's just not going to work. Whatever you think that you can create, it's like the Free State Project. Good luck, man. I want it to work, but it can't be at the state level. They have to start breaking this down into localities as soon as possible. And and you're going to have to close the borders. You can't have people coming in who are going to even purposely, you're right next to Massachusetts, one of the worst states on the planet. It's like, you have to close the borders. And anyone who is, you're going to have a right-wing culture. You're going to have a culture of morality. You know how many people I know that I've been to New Hampshire twice. I've spoken at Liberty Forum and I've spoken at Porkfest. I mean, there's just flat out degenerates there.
Yeah.
There's just flat out degenerates.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is that when you call people out on that, they get so upset when you say this is degeneracy. And I think this is what grows the state, is because you guys have no preferences. You guys just think you can run around. And it's kind of back to what you were saying about the strippers earlier. There's a general ethos there of just unreliability and the fact that you have no control over your own life. So, and honestly, in my personal life, I enjoy being around all the fucking boomers. I enjoy being around my dad. I enjoy being around all the parts guys and techs that I work with. I don't spend a lot of time with libertarian leaning people, and shocking, everybody in my band isn't a libertarian. I love hanging around these people.
What's up, everybody? We're going to take a quick break and tell you about the show's sponsors. We are brought to you by LMNT electrolytes. I've been using this stuff for years, and what I've honestly found is that if I didn't have electrolytes before some kind of cardio, and sometimes even before workouts, that my workout performance, or definitely cardio performance, would suffer greatly. Sodium is responsible for every single movement pretty much in your entire body, and let's say you drink a lot of caffeine like I like to do, then maybe it is a good idea, like I do every single morning, put some LMNT chocolate electrolytes there in your coffee to get a little bit more sodium, potassium, and magnesium in your coffee, so that way whatever diuretic effect you get from the caffeine is pretty much diluted by the fact that you put chocolate salt in it. Also, it tastes really, really good. Get some chocolate cream or hazelnut cream or even coconut, and mix that all up. It tastes really, really good. So make sure you go to drinklmnt.com/inlibertyandhealth and pick you up some electrolytes today. All right, guys, thanks.
Well, I mean, libertarian is basically turned into this term that's about free sex and drugs and legalizing drugs and shitting on the cops and everything. And I get it, man. I used to have this idea that, hey, if it's not harming you, it's none of your business. But I mean, degeneracy does grow the state. I'm sorry to tell people that degeneracy grows the state. If you have people who have to go into use drugs to the point that they have to go into like a program. Most of those programs that they're going to go into, not everybody can afford to go into the Betty Ford clinic and things like that, where they're going into state. I mean, it grows the state. It's also like we borders. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like, I used to be I have episodes, and I left them up. I have episodes where I argue for open borders. They're back in my catalog. And there are a lot of arguments about why you should have closed borders. And Hans Hermann Hoppe, God love him, I love the guy. He has these elaborate arguments about how public property is actually the property of net taxpayers and things like that. I'm just like, look, you're talking about Ancapistan. You're talking about building this libertarian society, and you're going to import people who don't know anything about that, don't want to know about that, and are immediately going to start using public resources, which grows the state. Are you retarded? I mean, are you stupid? And I understand All cops are bastards. If we're going to close the borders, you're going to have to use cops to do it. Border Patrol, and there's all, I know one former Border Patrol agent, really nice guy, left because he thought it was immoral. Says that a lot of those guys are good guys just doing a job. I think Bortak is a bunch of scumbags. But but I'm sorry, it's like you're going to need police. You're going to need police who can do things. It's like Carl Schmitt said, who's in power? It's the person who decides the exception. It says, okay, no one can murder. Okay, no, I'm sorry, that person can murder. Okay, no one can stop somebody who's traveling on land. You can stop somebody who's traveling on land. Why? Because them coming here does damage. It does damage to the culture, does damage to the economy. And then people, Cato Institute and Reason Magazine and all these retarded friggin' basically progressives, they're libertarians who they're really progressives, but they're using libertarianism to get to libertarian ends, to progressive ends, which really should make you question libertarianism, if they can use libertarianism to get to progressive ends.
Right.
But I mean, I'm sorry, borders is just, how do you have order if your borders are open and you have no idea? I don't like using the argument of, do you lock your own door, because it's private property. Do you have a fence around you? But think about it. If you want order, you have to make sure that people who are violent, people who aren't occupying your space. Okay. So you may have a fence around your house. You may electrify it. You may put barbed wire up. You may fortify your front door. Okay. I mean, the same basically goes for the national borders. How do you know that the person is coming over that border doesn't mean you harm? And I don't care. I mean, and how many are you willing to, you say, okay, well, 99.9% of those people are not coming here to do harm. Okay, that 0.01%, they murder people. That's on you. I'm sorry, and people have made the argument, oh, well, you can apply that to anything if you're for, no taxes. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. If the person if you are advocating for people to come into this country who, do a terrorist attack, I mean, you advocated for that. You advocate, but your morality. How did your morality work out? I think people need to realize that the world is a whole hell of a lot more violent than they actually think it is. Just because they're still living at home, and I'm telling you, a lot of these fucking libertarians are still living at home. I know it because I'll call them out on it, and I'll be like, as soon as you move out of your parents' house, and when you say that to somebody, and if they are married with kids, the first thing they're going to say is, I'm married with kids. What the fuck are you talking about? They come back. They do not come back with that. They just try to deflect away. Yeah. And that's why I think that, like, people who are still libertarians after 2020, people who are still libertarians after COVID, I mean, these are people who, I said it, I think they're people who lived at home during the whole thing. People who didn't have jobs, because I took a hit in pay for a few months there and everything, just because they cut our hours, they shortened hours.
So did I.
Yeah. But I mean, I wasn't affected by it, but I also understand that when people around me are affected, and their income goes down, and their family could break up, their wife might leave them. I mean, that affects the culture.
Oh, yeah.
That affects the culture around us. And if we're not protecting the culture around us, if you haven't gotten to the point yet that you don't understand that the beliefs and the actions of the people who you don't know but live in your general vicinity, if you don't realize that that affects you and will eventually affect you in some way, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. It just seems so obvious at this time, when it didn't seem obvious to me at another, previous, so I mean, I don't know how anybody still calls himself a libertarian after 2020. I mean, libertarians talk about how we have all the answers. Libertarians have all the answers. Yet whenever there's a problem, look at 2020. People didn't run to libertarians to ask them for answers. They mock them openly. They said, oh, I mean, a pandemic just completely destroys. I mean, think about it. If that was a real pandemic where, people were coming in from out of the country and bringing something in that would kill, say, 3% of the population. What's 3% of the population? 3% of the population would be 3 million, 10, 15 million people, something like that. Do you think people would have panicked? Do you think people would have now imagine Ancapistan with no borders.
How are you stopping that?
Yeah. How would you stop that? I mean, this government didn't do anything to stop it. And I think the reason they didn't do anything to stop it is because they knew that it was just going to affect what they call the useless eaters, older people.
Right.
And they probably wanted that. But I mean, if this would have been a real thing, I mean, could you imagine? It's like, I mean, oh, well, no, private companies would definitely, private companies would definitely be willing to lose money in order to shut down their, okay.
Yeah, well, what did they do towards the end of 2020 and in 2021? They made sure that, hey, if you don't get this certain thing, then you're not going to be able to come work for us anymore. And once again, I was all for, King DeSantis down there saying you cannot do that because, once again, this is now at the point where we're violating people's autonomy. And if that means using the government to stop, companies, bad actors from doing that shit, I don't understand how anybody could really sit there and say this is a bad thing. And like, it's ridiculous to think that some people said, oh, well, just get a different job. Like, that's not realistic for some people. Some people can't just up and go to a different job. I'm fortunate, there's plenty of fucking car dealerships out there, but that doesn't mean I want to leave. You have equity in places. The people that you work with sometimes mean a lot to you. Sometimes you even have family that you're working with. Oh, just get a new job.
Moving a toolbox is just hard enough.
Yeah, for real.
It's like, I don't want to get a tow truck. You got to get a tow truck in order to move,
Yeah, dude, fuck that. So people are fucking ridiculous. I know you had a little bit of a time limit, so I want to be respectful of your time. Pete, I guess I got a couple questions for you if you're good for them.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, what does liberty look like to you?
To me, I mean, it looks like where I can basically, where everybody in my general vicinity has a healthy fear of each other. And I don't mean that in a way that everybody's on their guard. It's just that, and I think that when I think about that, I think more biblically is when I think of fear, like the fear of God is like, it's like a really healthy respect.
And a discipline almost.
Yeah, a discipline. People who would be willing to, if they see somebody in the neighborhood who's not somebody who's just passing through, but somebody who's lurking and looking at things, they'll take care of it themselves. They'll just start calling people and they'll go, well, let's go find out what's going on here. Don't even need the cops. I mean, what does liberty look like to me? Living in a community where you don't have to write down laws, where everything is just, this is who we are. We don't have to write it down. As soon as you write it down, a lawyer can make it mean anything.
Yeah. Nice. What does health look like to you?
Health? Oh, man. Definitely not the United States.
Fair.
I mean, it's, as somebody who is really, really taken to concentrating on their health in the last 6 months to a year, and as you get older, you want to, you're like, you look at people who are, I look at people who are 5 and 6 years older than I am, who are basically invalids. I don't want that. If something gets hurt, something that you can't help, something that, a crushed vertebra or something like that. I mean, what can you do? But I mean, bringing it upon yourself. I mean, we live in a country where I think that pharma in this country is a bigger provider than like most of the rest of the countries in the world combined.
Well,
so it's like health to me is to be able to, make it to 75, 80 years old, but also have a quality of life. I remember there was this one guy, back when I worked in automotive. This guy was, I didn't believe it when he told me. He would come in like every 3 months or something like that, and he'd walk around and talk to everybody. And so I got talking to him one day. I mean, this guy, he was tall, stood up straight. He was 95 years old. And when he told me he was 95 years old, I just did not believe him. I'm just like, you're full of shit. And he pulls out his wallet, and I'm just like, holy crap. Health to me is to age and not have to slow down.
Nice. Yeah. Where can everybody find you?
The Quinones Show, all podcatchers. Don't look for me on YouTube. YouTube demonetized me, and I'm not going to fight it. So I'll use YouTube for live streams a couple times here and there, and maybe put up 30-second clips so that I can point people to Odyssey. Go to Odyssey and look up the Quinones Show. That's where all my videos are going to be from now on. Also, I have a Rumble channel, Quinones Show, and Substack, PeteSubstack.com. I didn't even really like the idea of Substack when I first heard about it, and now I friggin' love it. I love the platform. I love what they do. And also the Old Glory Club. That's a bunch of us have gotten together. A bunch of content creators have gotten together we created a fraternity. Basically, we support each other's work. We do live streams. We are on YouTube. If you go to YouTube, you look for Old Glory Club, you'll see America. We concentrate. It's all about America. Everything is about America, American history, current events, things like that. I did a episode on the ending of the Vietnam War with Thomas 777 a couple weeks ago, and that was a big hit. So check out the Old Glory Club, and we have a Substack too. We put out articles try to put out at least 2 or 3 a week. So check that out. And I think if you like my work, not everyone is like me. We all have a different flavor to us, but I think you'll really, really enjoy it. I think people are really enjoying it. So yep, those are the places.
Hell yeah. Well, Pete, this was a fascinating conversation. There were a whole bunch of topics floating around in my head, but I enjoyed the conversation the whole way through, so we'll definitely have to do another one sometime. So yeah, dude, if you don't got anything else, we'll close her out.
That's it, man.
Cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, libertarian is basically turned into this term that's about, free sex and drugs and legalizing drugs and shitting on the cops and everything. And I get it, man. I used to have this idea that if it's not harming you, it's none of your business. But I mean, degeneracy does grow the state. I'm sorry to tell people that degeneracy grows the state. If you have people who have to go into use drugs to the point that they have to go into like a program. Most of those programs that they're going to go into, not everybody can afford to go into the Betty Ford clinic and things like that, where they're going into state. I mean, it grows the state. It's also like borders. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like, I used to be I have episodes, and I left them up. I have episodes where I argue for open borders. They're back in my catalog. And there are a lot of arguments about why you should have closed borders. And Hans Hermann Hoppe, God love him, I love the guy. He has these elaborate arguments about how public property is actually the property of net taxpayers and things like that. I'm just like, look, you're talking about Ancapistan. You're talking about building this libertarian society, and you're going to import people who don't know anything about that, don't want to know about that, and are immediately going to start using public resources, which grows the state. Are you retarded?